Okay, let's talk Noni Madueke to Arsenal because I think this one is crazy in so many different ways. I think the fee at £40 million would be a ridiculously good sort of fee for Arsenal to get him at. I think it would be a silly price for Chelsea to sell at when you've got the sort of underlying metrics that Madueke has currently got. I'm going to speak about why I think Madueke could fit at Arsenal. There's a few sort of question marks in terms of how he'd fit around the likes of Saka. And I feel like there has to be some sort of plan in place for Noni to want to go to Arsenal. So we're going to speak about sort of the traits that he will bring to Arsenal and why Arteta likely does like him and the reasons that they might want him. But we're also going to speak about why Chelsea could be looking to flog him because I think at that price, I mean, we're not even really going to be speaking about why they're going to flog him. I'm going to be sort of questioning it because I think at 40 million, the risk reward of that deal is not high enough. I think at 60, around 55 to 60, I think that's the sort of territory where you take the money because the risk reward is actually makes a little bit more sense. At 40 million, I don't think it makes sense. I think it's too far sort of in one direction, and we're going to speak about that. Let's start off with just sort of thinking about what he would bring to Arsenal and why they'd be looking at him. So if we look at here, this is actually against Arsenal, but firstly, Madueke's ability to drive the ball up the pitch on his own and to sort of cover and eat up those yards and sort of put defenders on the back foot. Here you can see again, it's kind of in transition, but it's these moments where he can receive the ball out wide in space and he can get those defenders on the back foot by going from 1 to 100 quite quickly and driving inward towards the box. So here you can see he's got a lot of defenders on that back foot. They're in uncomfortable angles. You've got Gusto making that little run into the channel, which Madueke is just about to release. He's essentially made up the ground from here to the box in seconds, and he is going to kickstart an attack, and that's through those progressive carry numbers, which we'll speak about, because that is something that he will bring to Arsenal that they don't have as much of. One of the main things, though, is his ability to carry into the box, and this is something that I've always been really high on Madueke. And one reason why I think his underlying metrics speak so loudly to me and why I think he's sort of so close to that next level is because his ability to get himself into the box, which is obviously where you want to be in terms of dangerous areas. If you can keep driving yourself into the box, that is a positive for your team because you're going to get them into dangerous areas, whether that's getting into the box and winning a penalty, whether it's getting into the box and winning a corner, which Arsenal will love, or whether it's getting into the box and creating an angle for a shot or a pass. Now, as you can see here, you've got Madueke with his sort of he's got two markers and he's squared one up. He's got one sort of halting at stopping him cutting inside, and then you've got Huijsen here, who's had to come all the way over to sort of help double up on Madueke, and that's something in itself. He attracts double teams, and that's something that Saka does as well. So if you have one of them on each side, and we're going to speak about why his left side isn't as good, but if you had them both on the pitch at the same side at the same time, it is something to sort of keep an eye on. But the way that he squares them up here, it's the touch to get towards the box. He sees that space and he knows Huijsen's been dragged out. So he knows where he can attack that space to get inside the box. But he doesn't just attack it at pace. He's also very powerful on the ball. And it's the way that he steps across his man here, as you can see. Once he's put that ball, and the ball's just slightly out of picture, I think Cole Palmer's head's covering it. But as he's going to stride into the box here, he's getting his leg across Huijsen. He's getting his body in the way. He's using his hips and his shoulder to get back in the way and to offset Huijsen so that he can now make up ground into the box and make something happen. And again, as you can see here, Huijsen ends up on the floor. Madueke is inside the box. He manages to shuffle, put a cross into the box, and Jackson misses a sitter. But he creates a huge chance from this exact move where he can square up a 2v1, something that Arteta will want against low blocks, where he has the ability to go 2v1 and go direct, bring you those box carries, and create something out of it. Now, yes, his final decision making isn't anywhere near as good as it needs to be. It can leave a lot to be desired in a lot of games. That's where the frustration comes with Noni, and that's where the risk reward comes into it. Because I think at 40 million, it's a very good risk for Arsenal to take because it's not a good enough price for Chelsea to be selling at. Because if he then does put it together, you're talking about double that price worth of a winger. If he then starts turning all of those underlying metrics into the output that it could come with. That's why I think 50 to 60 is more in that range for Chelsea and what they'd want. But at 40 million for Arsenal, it's well worth that risk because he's got that game breaker sort of quality in that sense to give you those stats. Now, let's quickly talk about the actual stats themselves. And I'll leave it on here. Noni Madueke, he averages the most progressive carries of any Arsenal winger. So you've got Madueke with 6.98, Saka with 5.04, Martinelli with 4.69, Trossard with 2.75, and we put Eze here as well because there's a lot of talk that Eze would be following Madueke and they'd sort of come in together. So Eze with 2.4, so not as many for him, but it just shows again, progressive carries, it depends on how you look at the stat, but it's the ability to bring that ball forward and really put Arsenal on the front foot and put defenders into sort of tricky areas. So that's a key stat to have, considering they don't have as much of it. Carries into the penalty area is the big one. And let's go back to, well, yeah, we're on this picture here, but this is what we're talking about with this. 3.92 carries into the penalty area, creating 0.47 non-penalty XG. Saka, 2.61 carries into the penalty area with 0.32 non-penalty XG. And that's the second highest. That's the highest of any Arsenal winger. So Madueke has got 0.15 more non-penalty XG per game than any Arsenal winger / attacker, which is crazy. Saka, like I say, 2.61 carries into the penalty area. Martinelli, 2.4 carries into the penalty area with 0.32 non-penalty XG as well. Trossard, 1.04 carries into the penalty area with 0.25 non-penalty XG. Eze, only 0.76 carries into the penalty area, 0.31 non-penalty XG, so a little bit higher than Trossard. He's a little bit more of your creative type, like left wing 10 hybrid who can stitch things together and a bit more of a creative passer than he's a carrier, even though his take-on numbers are really good. Going on to take-ons, Eze actually has the most. He has 2.33 per game with 48.6% success rate, which is the best. Madueke is the second best with 2.08 take-ons per game, again showing you this ability to be direct and beat his man. 45.3% success rate, which is the same as Trossard, who has a 45.3% success rate with only 1.34 completed, though. Martinelli, 1.48 completed with 33.8%, and Saka, 1.99 with 42.3%. Lastly, when I sort of talk about the volume of these actions, that's another reason I really like Madueke. And like I say, sometimes in these areas, he can make the wrong decision. But what he does is he creates through relentless volume. And that is something that a lot of teams, they want in their team, to at least have one or two players like this. I think that's what City wanted with Marmoush. He's a volume shooter and he's a volume sort of runner. Madueke, in his own way, he's a volume shooter. He's a volume box carrier. And I think this thing through Madueke, 3.58 shots per 90, the most of any Arsenal attacker, again. Saka with 3.19, Martinelli with 2.13, Trossard with 2.61, and then again, Eze adding a little bit more as well with that 3.25. So you're adding this volume in shooting, but also in take-ons and carries through these additions. So now that we've sort of looked at the stats, let me just quickly move on to these last few images of Madueke on the left-hand side and why I think he struggles a little bit more on this side. Due to the fact that he can get trapped a little bit easier. Again, you can see he's got the double team here, but what he wants to do is he wants to use his left foot, and he's kind of trapped against that sideline because he wants to use his left foot to push it past the opposition on the outside of the block and attack that space in behind that you can see behind the two defenders. Whereas on the other side, he's sort of already carrying with a bit of momentum and he can use it to push it ahead of him. Whereas here, he's a little bit easier to keep with his back to play and to keep sort of side on. He's not as good. It's not as easy for him to stand them up and get onto his stronger foot where he can go both ways. So he's a little bit more limited, and this actually ends up with him getting tackled. But again, he's tried to sort of lead with his left foot rather than taking a little bit of an easier sort of route into here, dribbling with his right foot inside, which is somewhere where he can get caught on that left-hand side. And that's one reason I don't overly like him there, even though I do think he can bring some traits on that side in terms of that ability to carry into the box. But I do think that it's something that needs to be looked at. If we look at the tactics board, how could he fit in? Now, I think the first thing to think about would be with Arsenal is he'd be sort of the backup to Saka. If Saka's not there, you've got Madueke, and that's something that sort of they suffered with last season. But in my mind, I don't think that's the only role that he's going to be playing, because otherwise, I don't think that he'd be willing to just come and be the Saka replacement and backup. And maybe it is because Saka, they don't want to use Saka as often. Maybe they want to rest him more often and they want more rotation rather than having to play him every single game. So maybe that's part of the buy-in. But I also have a feeling that part of it will be that he has the chance to play on the left as well. And that you have the chance to see both Madueke and Saka in the same team. Because that's the only thing that really makes sense to me as to why Madueke would be so willing to make that move, knowing that Arsenal's best player and most prized possession is in his exact position. So like I say, those with the issues that we just spoke about here, is something that Arteta would need to sort of come into and try and sort of figure out how he wants to attack it. Because as well, the other option is Saka could go on the left, but again, whether you're going to move Saka, and this is, I'm not saying this would happen like at all, because Saka is like the primary player. You want to maximise Saka. But if there's certain games that you want to get Saka sort of crossing into the box on the outside of a block rather than sort of cutting in and sort of giving those in swingers into the box, then maybe one week you'd have Madueke on this side to be a little bit more direct and Saka to be more of a creator on the left. It's something that maybe makes a bit of sense for Arteta, but it's one of those things that you need to think about. Because like I said, I think Madueke is an interesting proposition for them at 40 million. Now, from Chelsea's perspective, as I've said on a lot of occasions, I think 50 to 60 makes a lot more sense as to why you'd make the risk. But I do think with the numbers that we just spoke about today, Madueke is close to exploding if that last bit clicks. And I think with the sort of experience at Arsenal around him, a little bit more sort of pushing on him to sort of level up, I think the ego could be an issue. But like I said, I think at Arsenal, maybe some of the other players won't let him get away with it. Whereas I think within quite a young Chelsea group, Madueke is quite a big character. Whereas I think at Arsenal, we maybe wouldn't be afforded the same liberty. So it'd be interesting to see what happened there. Let me know what you guys think of the Madueke to Arsenal deal. What do you think is a fair price as a Chelsea fan for the sale? And do you think he'll do well at Arsenal, yes or no? Are you excited if you're an Arsenal fan by the proposition of adding Madueke? Do you think he improved your attack? All those questions, let me know in the comments. Drop a like if you haven't already. Subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.